Spending months on one track is killing your progress as a producer. In fact, it's the #1 reason why most producers stay stuck for years. Let me explain why. I'm Jonny Marksman, producer, coach, and DJ. We've had Beatport #1s, millions of streams, and taught others how to do the same. The only reason why I ever got here is because I stopped flogging one track to death, seeking perfectionism, and learned a simple workflow that let me finish multiple tracks every single week. I've taught this to hundreds of producers, and this changes everything. Here's the problem. When you spend 3 months on the same song, you lose all objectivity. You burn your dopamine stores, and you can't tell if it's good anymore. You get stuck in endless tweaks, which make the track worse, and you end up hating the track. The real growth and progression happens when you stop obsessing over one track and start finishing a lot of tracks. Quality is created through volume. You only need 10% of your tracks to be amazing, but you only get there by finishing 90% of them. It's actually quality and quantity to build momentum, and the only way you're going to get to quality is through quantity. The first 10, 20, 50, 100 tracks you make are probably not going to be that good. Mine weren't either, but if I look back to the stuff I was making 10 years ago and the stuff I made last week, it's like a completely different person. Truly refined ideas, tight arrangements, and interesting storytelling. Case in point, check out this clip from Chris Lake explaining this exact thing.
I looked, you should have seen my stuff 20 years ago. Bloody awful. Absolutely awful. And I realized how much I didn't have my finger on the pulse yet. It took me a long time to figure out how to make that all work.
One of my good friends, Bound to Divide, Jules, he told me he made 100 tracks and released 7 of them. Only the best of the best. And here's the real driver. If you have a large quantity of finished tracks, you have the ability of choice to choose what you release. And this is why having a workflow is really important. If you could finish a track a week, which by the way, with the workflow I'm about to show you, anybody can do regardless of your situation. That's 4 tracks every month. You could potentially release 52 tracks a year on average. This is the exact workflow I use to go from blank canvas to a mastered track within 4 to 6 hours. Let's dive in. I present to you the MPA 6-hour workflow, where you will be able to finish a track in 6 hours. You should be creating 10 to 20 ideas every single month, which might sound crazy to you right now, but if you break it down, that's an idea every other day, and a fully finished track every week. Totally achievable even if you work full-time, you have a relationship, you have kids, or you play sport or do all sorts of other stuff outside of sitting in the studio all day making music like you might want to be. And by the way, to get to the point where you want to be in the studio all day, you need to have a workflow and consistently churn out music. By having a workflow, it allows you to have complete creative freedom and have more fun by knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. It keeps your momentum going, and when you start finishing more tracks, it's going to inspire you to keep going and get better and better. Success breeds success, right? It's like going to the gym with a training plan, knowing exactly what you need to do every time you go in. The first phase is get to the loop as quickly as possible. Now, with this in mind, a lot of producers I speak to compose chronologically. You are going to run out of momentum, run out of dopamine, and not know where to go if you approach this way. Instead, begin with the end in mind. Start at the climax of the track and think, okay, how am I going to get here? At this point, it's also important to think about, for your particular style of house and techno, what is one of the most important aspects of this track? And therefore, that should be what you start with. However, it's worth noting that the emotional harmony and the groove are going to be important regardless of genre. So, once you've gotten this down, then you need to start composing and building out the loop, the climax of the track, throwing ideas together. Add in the drums, add in the chords, add in the rhythmic and harmonic supports that are going to enhance your idea and make it feel full and complete. The best tracks don't have that many elements going on. We'll save that for a later video. But then once you have the canvas there, this is where I typically start thinking about the hook, the melody, or the vocal that's going to be in there. Once we have the loop done, this is where I will do what's called the static mixdown, which is basically a rough polish. Now, it's worth noting that through this process, we're getting sounds to be about like 80% there. I would say if you're spending more than 5 to 10 minutes on a sound, move on. Because remember, it's not about just one sound, it's about how they interact together. You don't have to absolutely kill yourself over getting it to sound really amazing at this phase in the process. Just get it sounding decent, good enough, about like 70 or 80% of where it could be with your current ability. And then once you've got this loop, you might think, well, maybe I might need a B section. This is optional and a bit more advanced. Most beginners think that every idea they create is going to be the one that gets them noticed, gets them signed, and gets them recognized. Spoiler alert, it's not. You have to finish dozens, if not hundreds, of crappy tracks before you even know what's good and have developed your style. Think about it this way. Professional athletes, you're seeing them after playing hundreds, if not thousands of matches. The first 50, 100 matches, that's just practice. No one sees those, but they matter for your progress, because you're not going to be in the big league without those. Now, the real secret sauce with all of this is truly learning the hows and whys behind all of this. So things like the music theory, like how to actually convey emotions to the listener to make it relatable, mixing concepts, workflow hacks, and with this, you're going to get faster and better each time and keep your objectivity. Your ideas will be a lot better and more solid the quicker you work. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's not about cutting corners. It's about knowing what matters and what works and ignoring the rest. For example, if you know exactly how to convey certain emotions through certain chords, then you can do that in 2 to 5 minutes, rather than randomly experimenting and trying to come up with something that does that. You have to bear in mind, not every idea you come up with is going to be great or work in practice. You only will understand that with repetition. The next phase here is the arrangement, and this is typically where we spend the most time, especially in house and techno. This is one of the most critical parts, is the telling of the story. So we start off with the loop that we just made. And we have to think, how do I get here? And so you start structuring out your track, getting to that loop, and then what happens after that? How do we get out and finish the track, basically? And it's often just the inverse of what you did to get there, just a bit more condensed. But with that in mind, much like any story, it's got to be compelling and interesting, and we want to keep the listener hooked, not just repeating sections over and over again. Every second counts, and therefore, if something is going on for a while and the listener gets bored, they're going to stop listening to the track and move on to the next one. Simple as that. So this is one of the most important parts. Once we have our macro level structure down, this is where we are going to go through and enhance everything with tension and release using the micro level arrangement. So the automation of synths, like adding in effects, ear candy moments, like little cool sections where it's going to just extra little pizzazz, the kind of track you will listen to multiple times and discover something that you didn't quite notice the first few times. Therefore, this is where we should spend most of our time. Or maybe you might discover that you need to add in more parts as you structure and arrange it, which is okay. You might also think this could do with a B section to change things up, or maybe during the break we change the chord progression or do something different. But you'll only get to this point as you start structuring and realizing that, and a lot of the interest and enhancement and release is going to come from this final stage. And it's really important because you want your listener to listen all the way through, because that's good for the algorithm. That means more streams for you, and it also means the algorithm's going to push it further, because that's good data for the algorithm. Comment if you want to see that, and like and subscribe so that you don't miss it when it comes out. Now, this final part might ruffle a few feathers, but the final polish, the final mixdown and mastering doesn't take long at all. And this is once you understand the fundamentals of mixing and mastering, which will be in a future video. The purpose of this phase is to fix any issues that might have arisen from the second phase, such as volume changes or certain sounds becoming loud at certain points, and then get as quickly as possible to the finished first version so that we can go out, test it, get feedback from trusted sources, and then make those tweaks down the line. Now, this starts with the dynamic mixdown. So once we've done all the automation and arrangement, some of the sounds are going to be a little bit out of balance and need refining and tweaking in certain parts, so we go and fix all these issues that might have arisen, such as things becoming too loud during high tension moments. This would also be we would go and reference against other tracks in the genre, very well produced music. So once we've gotten our dynamic mixdown done, we'll just check to see if we're in the right direction. We'll check to see if there are any major issues with the way we've mixed it, and when you're starting out, there probably will be a fair few, but as you train and become more experienced, the issues are going to be a lot more subtle, and it will just be a little nudge in the right direction with experience and consistency and training your ears. And then the final step is mastering. That final once over, the icing on the cake, that's just going to make that track truly stand out and be ready to play, ready to test, and ready to send for feedback from your producer friends, or ideally from professionals who can pick it apart and know exactly what they're talking about, such as us. There you go. That's the workflow. You can get ideas fleshed out, arranged, and finished very quickly. So after feedback, this would be where you make subtle tweaks. Might just take you an extra 30 minutes. Shouldn't take long, and then the track's basically done, ready to play out in sets, ready to send to labels or release. Now, you might think that these phases might feel initially unrealistic to start with, and this is why the secret sauce comes in, truly understanding the fundamentals, the hows and whys behind why we're doing things, because music is subjective. The context always changes, but the problems are often the same. If you understand the fundamentals of how to solve these problems and understand music theory, how to capture and convey emotions that are going to resonate with your listener, mixing principles to make things sound tight and punchy, and have this workflow and the additional time-saving hacks that you can use, you're going to get faster and better at the same time, and also have more music ready to go. Whether you release it or not, or still think you need further refinement, because at the end of the day, nobody gives a flying Frenchman's fuck if you have the best idea and loops in the world. The only currency this industry deals in is finished tracks. So let's get those hundreds of ideas on your hard drive finished so that we can start building something together. One of my guys, Jaden, based in Australia, has gone from taking months to finish tracks to getting at least one done every week, barring a little bit of feedback from us. These are ready to send out to labels. And in fact, one of the label bosses of a label he sent to wanted to do a personal collaboration with him because he loved his style so much. But he only got there through volume, consistency, and repetition, and refining things through all of that. So here's the shift. Workflow creates momentum, quality, and finishing tracks isn't just about speed, it's about having the luxury to release the best. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want to waste years with unfinished projects, click the first link in the description. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video where we'll talk about how mixing is not your biggest problem and what actually is.